Yeah, righty. I believe we are live. Hello, Leanne. Welcome to
Hello.
Paris and Basscast. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm fantastic. Thanks. How about you?
I'm well, thank you. So Paris and Basscast is a weekly episode that we run to inform our audience of the changes that are coming up in property management, sales and finance, the three services we provide. And today we are joined by Leanne Pilkington, who is the Managing Director of Laing+Simmons and the President of Real Estate Institute, New South Wales. There you go.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely. So the topic of discussion today is the changes that have come about in the Tenancies Act, as well as the industry reforms that sort of happened at around about the same time when the lockdowns commenced, didn't it?
It really did. Yeah, March 23 was the date for both of those reforms. But as you say, that was when we really realised that COVID was serious and it was going to have a massive impact. It was when people were starting to be working from home, and I just cannot even believe it all happened at the same time. It was crazy.
I mean, I remember I had booked in for the roadshow at Castle Hill, and we weren't allowed in because that was the day that the stop on the mask.
Well, yeah. So we were I was on stage with 200 people in Castle Hill when Scott Morrison said that no gatherings over 100 people, and we're like, okay, now what do we do? And Castle Hill RSL had come in, they'd counted the numbers, they'd locked the doors, as you say, and so we had to split the rooms and speak. So we had to split the presenters. So our property management person went first here and our social media person went first here, and then they swapped over, and it was chaos. But anyway, thankfully we were in Castle Hill RSL, which is a big enough venue to be able to split the groups up. But yeah, crazy times.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons that I reached out to you is obviously we hear the daily updates that you're providing with COVID, which is absolutely phenomenal. But I think, you know, with this whole industry reforms that have come in because of everything else that's taken a priority, it hasn't been talked about as much.
I would agree with that. Yes, it's been very complicated and very confusing for a lot of people. So good on you for shining a light on it.
Oh, thank you. So just on the industry reforms, how long have they been in the pipeline, and why did the changes come about?
They've been in the pipeline for more than a decade, would you believe? And so for me, one of the reasons that I got onto the board of the Real Estate Institute in the first place was, as you mentioned, that I'm at Laing+Simmons. So my job as a franchisor, I would have people come to me and say, okay, Leanne, I want to open a real estate business. And I'd be like, awesome, tell me about your real estate experience. And people would often say to me, oh, well, I'm licensed. It's like, great.
Tick.
Your real estate experience. Oh, no, I've never worked in real estate. I'm an accountant, or I had a 7-Eleven franchise. I mean, I'm not making this up. These are things that conversations I actually had. And back in the old days, back in the 80s, when I became a real estate agent, you had to have a couple of years experience to open a business. And rightfully so. But the government at the time wanted more competition because they believed that more competition would drive lower prices for consumers. And that's all well and good. We're all okay for competition, but we need competent competition. And so the Real Estate Institute started really pushing for this 10 or 12 years ago. And we finally made progress. It went through Parliament in 2018, but our Minister for Better Regulation at the time, Matt Keane, was keener on headlines around dodgy agents than he was around solving the problem. And so whilst these reforms had gone through Parliament, he did nothing to enact them. And so that took a new minister, Minister Anderson, made that happen for us, and we will forever be grateful. And as you said, on the 23rd of March, they were enacted, and basically the real reason for it is to improve the education and training to provide a better consumer experience from real estate agents.
Absolutely. And I guess from the experience comes to be able to, you're representing an asset which is the most valuable of a person.
Absolutely.
And you've got to make sure you're giving it in right hands. So from a landlord's perspective or from an owner's perspective, what has changed from them, or what do they need to be looking out for when they're making, appointing an agent to purchase, to sell their property or to rent out their property?
Well, certainly from a sales perspective, well, actually from both perspectives. At the moment, real estate agents just need to have a certificate.
Yeah.
You can get that in a very, very short amount of time, literally a couple of days. At the, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then that's all the education they had to do. They had to do continuing professional development, but it was very easy to get that very quickly as well.
Yeah.
So now, every real estate agent has got 4 years to become a fully licensed diploma level, diploma qualified real estate agent. And so if they don't do their qualification in that period of time, they can't be in the industry. So what it means for consumers is that they will have people that are better educated and more effectively trained, which will provide just better advice. Absolutely. And a better experience for everybody.
And obviously the changes from a operational point of view is coming to is the fact that the signatures of the agency agreements that become a binding agreement can only be done by a licensed real estate agent. So
correct.
If you're a certificate holder, you can no longer engage in that service. So you have to have another person sign that for you. So I guess from a signature perspective, that's something that the owners need to be
aware of. Yes, absolutely. And that's the same for sales and for property management.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's basically, in a nutshell, that industry reforms is more of a professional standards for those that are practicing in property to be well qualified, to be able to provide the recommendations and engaging in that service. And obviously from a real estate agent's perspective, there's a whole heap of other changes that they need to be looking at.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, changes to trust accounting requirements and all of that sort of stuff. But
there you go. And then talking about the residential tenancy law, so that's one of the bigger ones. There is continual education that we are providing since the regulation came into place, but there's a lot of questions about why these things have come about now, and the likes of, for example, the smoke alarms. Not a lot of landlords at this stage know that is now becoming their responsibility to maintain on an annual basis. So what are some of the reasons that these changes have come about, and let's talk about more of those kind of how that impact that relationship.
So it still blows my mind that those changes were instituted at the same time as the other changes. We didn't need to be all at once. I think there was probably a little bit too much change all in one go. But the Real Estate Institute had been working with the government for a number of years on the review of the Residential Tenancies Act, and there was something in the order of reports to the tune of 65,000 words that the Institute put forward. Wow. Certainly we are much happier with the outcome than where we started, but there's certainly a number of things in there that we are not supportive of. But when you're consulting with government, you have to accept that you're just not going to get everything that you want. And from a smoke alarm perspective, I would definitely recommend that any landlord has got a company that they are employing to do those checks. You just can't afford to mess around with it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons when you talk about previous case studies where I think it was the previous roadshow that I was listening to, where the smoke alarm, the battery needed to be replaced. The tenant said they'll get to it. They didn't, and the house burnt down, and there was a death. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why it's come about. And it makes sense. I mean, it's only $99 that we are for the service that we are engaging with Smoke Alarms Australia.
They're a great supplier. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So that's one of those changes. The other one being the overall lease agreement in itself. There's been a few changes there, and the two that have been questioned a lot is one, the landlord's contact details are now available to the tenant.
I know, that was one we fought and fought and fought. And the justification, because I was you know, with my role at REI, it means that I am in these meetings and I am speaking to the legislators, and I said to them, but why? You know, I channeled my inner 5-year-old, as I do sometimes, but why?
Yeah.
But help me to understand why we need this.
Yeah.
Because I'm a landlord and I pay for a real estate agent to take care of that for me. I don't want my tenant having my details. I mean, it's not rocket science, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, yes, but what if the tenant is needing something and the real estate agent keeps on saying no, they need to be able to find the landlord? I'm like, no, they really don't.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is one that I won't let go.
Yeah.
There will be reviews. I'm not quite sure what the timeline is, but it is one that I will not let go. We will continue to try and get that that changed, because it's nonsensical.
Yeah, and especially because the details that is the email and the phone number, which is a lot of information for a tenant that may, you know, if things go pear-shaped and you don't want to go down that path. So
no, you really don't. That is why you pay for an agent, right? So you don't have to deal with those difficult conversations that sometimes agents and tenants have to have.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other one was about the lease agreement not being signed until the landlord information statement's being signed. So what's the change in the landlord information statement? What do they need to sign off on it now?
I wish I could give you a really easy answer to that.
Yeah.
But they just feel that people need to have all the information before they sign the agreements, which I understand, but we, you know, particularly when it's a competitive rental market, you want to, as a tenant and a landlord, you want to be sure that you are committing and you are getting the property that you want or the tenant that you want. So all of these things are just barriers to achieving that outcome in my view. And, you know, with government, we keep saying to them, what is the problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we in the industry can come up with a more effective way to solve that problem. But that's another one that's on our list.
And there was talks about fair trading. So the actual, you know, the use of fair trading for consultation or resolving questions by the general tenants. Is that there's potential for that to be changed?
Well, so do you mean the mediation?
Yeah.
Yep,
and as well as the overall role of fair trading within, you know, because obviously if a tenant's not happy with an outcome, they're getting in touch with fair trading, then they're getting involved in trying to help.
Yeah, so particularly in this whole COVID world that we're in, there are some challenges. You know, the landlords really have been left out in the cold, quite frankly, by government, because you know, the government is saying, okay, well, we'll give you a 25% rebate on your land tax. Well, only 16% of residential landlords pay land tax. And of course, they're the big residential landlords, the ones that probably don't need the help anyway. And so the majority of landlords are getting no assistance, and they're being told by government, you need to negotiate in good faith. They're not getting any assistance. And if landlords and tenants through their agents can't agree on a rental reduction or deferment or waiver, then fair trading are able to mediate. And if you're still not able to agree, then NCAT will go and put an order.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I'm not sure who you recommend for landlord insurance, but we've had one of the,
of course,
who else would it be, right? Who else would it be? We had one of the big landlord insurers come out this week and say, if a landlord and a tenant agree on a rent reduction, then we will not cover that gap. And if the tenant then leaves not paying anything, we will only reimburse you for that negotiated amount, not the total amount, unless you go to NCAT and get an order from NCAT. And so that flies in the face of what the government has asked us to do, right? Because the government has asked us to negotiate in good faith. Yeah. So, you know, it's just it's a crazy situation.
Interesting indeed. And then some of the other changes that have been proposed or that have come into effect is the break fees. Now, what I've noticed from them, obviously it's divided into quarters, so depending on how long you've got left to go in the agreement.
Correct.
But it sounds like if you're in a periodic agreement, from a landlord perspective, you're better off because you're going to get 21 days. As
exactly. And we had that conversation. So they're trying to give the tenants more flexibility and more stability, but they've actually done, you know, they've meant, yeah, you're right. It means that it's better for landlords to have people on periodic leases than it is to have them in a lease. Yeah. And that is just crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lease is just it's not being treated as contract.
Exactly. So mainly the reason for that came about was to provide more
flexibility for tenants.
Okay. To be able to move quicker.
Yeah.
And then the other big one, domestic violence. That's been a new one that's come about. It's so sad to see the numbers.
Yeah, it's really difficult because everybody is absolutely supportive of getting a victim out of a victim of domestic violence out of a dangerous situation. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But is it the landlord's responsibility to be covering the cost of that? And so I'm sure, you know, as you said, Realty Protect is your insurer, and they've got a great domestic violence coverage within there. And so my absolute recommendation to every landlord is get insurance and make sure you're clear on the domestic violence provisions in your insurance, because that way, you are covered and you can help your tenant.
Yeah.
But we sort of felt that it should have been a little bit more burden of proof on the tenants, but absolutely supportive of the fact that we need to help the victims of domestic violence wherever we can.
And especially now, I think there was a statistic about you know, being stuck at home.
Yes.
The perpetrator a lot more than what you would normally. So it's bringing out a lot of those cases. So in a nutshell, if you are a victim of domestic violence, you know, there's differences of you know, the break fee of the lease is different.
It's gone. That's right. Yeah. And there's also issues around if you know, only one person leaves and there's, you know, still another person there. It's really complicated. It is really complicated.
Yeah. There you go. And then obviously there's a lot more changes which we won't have time to cover as well. So I'll put in a link for the Fair Trading website, which has a lot more of those details. I guess one of the other interesting one that I found was the minimum standards for fit for habitation, where every room has to have a power point and enough ventilation as well. So there's lots of new changes that have come about, which
is not unreasonable. Let's be honest. You know, access to bathrooms and, you know, hot water and all that sort of stuff. You wouldn't think you would need regulation like that, right?
But I think some of the, I guess, again, in a way, it does, you know, from a professional level, of the standards of the build as well, because, you know, let's face it, there are dodgy builders out there that do cut corners and, you know, that don't have those provisions, but at least for the owner to be aware that this is the expectation of being able to rent out a property. It has to have these certain features.
And it's not the real estate agent's fault. We're just following the law, right?
Making them aware. There you go. Perfect. And then the other thing was about the proposed changes to stamp duty. What is that at the moment?
Don't you? Yeah, don't you love that? So it's a bit like when the Prime Minister came out and said, no tenant will be evicted in the next 6 months. What tenants heard was, we don't have to pay rent for 6 months. And then it just threw everybody into absolute chaos when it was just badly communicated. Same with the Treasurer coming out saying, axe the tax. A lot of people then just went, okay, stamp duty is going to be gone. And let's face it, you know, when you consider you're spending $40,000 for every million, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
But the reality is, it's about $13 billion worth of stamp duty in the state's coffers. That has to be replaced with something.
Something else,
What they are talking about is replacing it with land tax. which is not something that we at the REI support, because the reality with land tax is it's a tax that you have to pay every year, but it's also a tax that can creep up.
That's right.
You know, every year. So, I've had a lot of agents reaching out to me in the last few weeks since the Treasurer came out and spoke about that and said people are just holding off to wait and see what happens with stamp duty. And the government has because I rang the Minister's office and said, you've got to come out and make a statement as to the timeline, because this is crippling transactions. And they came back and said there will no changes will be made without extensive consultation with industry, with consumers, and with all levels of government, so opposition, crossbenchers, all of that sort of stuff. There needs to be extensive consultation. That will not happen in a hurry. Don't hold your breath. So whilst they still haven't given a timeline, you know, if anything happens in the next sort of 18 months, I'll be surprised.
And these, I mean, especially with the industry reforms taking 10 years, it seems to be a long-term thing. So not something that people should be.
No, that's right. There's also, you know, there's been the government also, not that even the government, there's been some conversation around the government saying, okay, we'll give some assistance to construction of new property, and the you know, one of the industry bodies has said, okay, we reckon that they should give us $50,000 for every new property. So we've had so many people go, oh, I'm not going to buy a new property, I'm going to wait and see. It's like, the government. Sometimes I feel like we're in utopia. You ever watch that TV show where they come out and they make announcements, and then nothing happens? Exactly. It's like, so I've just come out of a board meeting with the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales, and one of the resolutions of that meeting was that we do need to go back to government this week and say, you know, you need to, any of these things, you need to be very careful about your timing of your announcements. And if you are going to announce things for the future, you need to be able to make them retrospective. So I don't know. We'll see where we land, but I wouldn't be postponing any decisions waiting for a change in stamp duty. That's for sure.
That's right. And that's what we're recommending to all of our clients as well. I mean, obviously, there's lots of external factors that impact your decision when you're purchasing a property. But for those kind of things that are speculation or not yet confirmed, don't base your decisions on that, because by the time it's, you know, say, for example, if it does take 2 years, the property prices would have changed by then.
For sure. Yeah, look, I'm in the process of, I've got my loan document right here, actually, that I've just signed. So I'm in the process of buying something personally. If that gives people any confidence. I'm not waiting for stamp duty changes, because it's just, I want to buy a property.
It happens. Yeah, exactly. And is it Canberra that currently has that annual tax?
Yeah, they have land tax down in Canberra. So yes.
Model. Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Well, until that happens, at least you know, things are here to stay, and it's good to see the renewed interest in the market. I mean, we've seen the last couple of weeks specifically from vendors as well as from buyers that you know, it's starting to pick up. People are transacting, and they're not as bad. I mean, even the hedonic price index that came out by CoreLogic, the New South Wales grew by 0.4%. So it's not as bad as everyone is saying.
No, it's really not. Just to give you a bit of an example, in Sydney last weekend, the clearance rate was 77.6, I think, percent, admittedly off a low base. However, if you consider that we say that around about 62% clearance rate is where the market is starting to rise. So strong results. So there's a lot of people out there ready to buy. The problem is that we don't have enough stock on the market. And so when you've got high levels of demand and low levels of supply, prices will always remain strong. So if I had a property to be selling, I'd be putting it on sooner rather than later. I know everybody likes to wait for until spring, but we need to be realistic. Spring this year also coincides with the end of JobKeeper, the end of the mortgage freezing. So spring is a bit of an uncertain kind of time. So I would be bringing decisions forward if it's something that you certainly want to do this year.
Absolutely. And then there was an announcement, which I'm not fully across, but there was even the Real Estate Institute sent out an email about the job maker that the Prime Minister has announced. So it's
Yes.
good to see that there's plans for the next step for us to
yeah, and to that end, yeah, the government have reached out and said, okay, what do we need to do to you know, reinvigorate the real estate market moving forward? How can we help? How are agents coping, and all of that sort of stuff? So there's definitely a focus on what needs to happen post September. So let's see.
Interesting times ahead.
Yeah, for sure.
There you go. And is there any other updates with COVID this week that are noteworthy that we need to?
Thankfully, no.
Yeah.
It's been an exhausting couple of months. So really, we're out at the moment. I did a press release on the weekend talking about, you know, just what we've just spoken about, the data not supporting. There's been a lot of conversations in the media around big price drops, which are just not supported by the data. And so we're suggesting that people really need to look beyond the headlines when they're making decisions. Another one coming out today also on the landlord insurance issue, and the fact that the insurance companies really need to step up and support the landlords that they've made millions of dollars out of. And also there was in Parliament last week, it went through Parliament that there was a recommendation from the opposition for a $2,500 support package for landlords, which, let's face it, if you're supporting landlords, you are by default supporting tenants as well. You're supporting both sides in the transaction. Number of other states around the country have had financial support, and New South Wales, whilst it's in there, the minister needs to activate it, and the minister has made the decision not to. So we're coming out calling for that because our landlords need more help. They just have been given almost nothing.
Especially those that, you know, obviously the land tax, it's not applicable for everyone. So at least
84% of us don't pay land tax, right?
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Any final words before we finish up?
It's lovely to catch up with you, and good on you for bringing this sort of information directly out to your consumers. It's fantastic.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I will end this live stream now. We'll see you guys next time. And obviously, if there's any questions at all, feel free to type them through. We will be answering them afterwards as well. And I'll be sending through the links for the fair trading where you can get more information, and the Real Estate Institute in New South Wales. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure.
Bye.